The first AP Top 25 poll of the new year was just released, and there was a lot of movement throughout the rankings after all of the recent results we've had in college basketball. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the AP Top 25 rankings, starting at number 25 and working our way to the number 1 team in the country. But before we get into the AP poll, if you enjoy the content, please consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. And now, let's jump into it. And as always, I want to quickly go over some of the teams that are receiving votes but just missed out on the top 25 rankings. And first up, we have Villanova, who just sits outside the top 25 at number 26 and feels deserving of inclusion, which is why they're in my rankings this week. The Wildcats profile as the second best team in the Big East right now and have a key win over Seton Hall, and their only losses are to quality teams, and they're clearly an NCAA tournament team right now. Then you have Utah State, who is one of the most underrated teams nationally and the clear best squad in the Mountain West right now. They had a recent 42-point demolition of Colorado State that stands out, and they're ranked around 30 by voters and could crack the top 25 here soon. Then I have to mention Miami, Ohio, who remains unbeaten at 15-0 and continues to receive votes to get into the top 25 as they're hovering around 30th as well. And while the resume lacks high-end wins, being one of the last undefeated teams matters, and I'm not ranking them yet either, but if they can continue winning, they will be rewarded here soon. And then the last two teams I want to mention are Florida and Kentucky, as Florida drops out of the rankings after another disappointing road loss, this time to an unranked Missouri team, and the backcourt inconsistency still continues to limit the ceiling of the Gators. And then you have Kentucky, who appeared to be close to re-entering the rankings, but a road loss to Alabama halted that, and now they're only receiving a few votes to get into the top 25, and they'll need a strong SEC stretch to climb back into the rankings. But starting off the rankings at number 25, we have UCF, who has finally cracked the AP Top 25 with a statement resume win over Kansas, and Johnny Dawkins' Golden Knights are now 12-1 on the year and riding an 11-game winning streak, which is highlighted by that massive home win over Kansas. And this team's biggest strength is their depth, as they're rolling out a true 9 to 10 man rotation with 4 double-figure scorers right now, including Riley Kugel and Jordan Burks, who have been their 2 best players so far. And their only loss came back in November against an undefeated Vanderbilt team. And right now, I actually have them just outside of my top 25, but completely understand why they are ranked here. And they have an upcoming stretch against Arizona and Iowa State, which will quickly tell us if UCF is deserving of being ranked or if they've just had a strong early season. Next at number 24, we have SMU, who also jumps into the rankings after one of the loudest wins of the week, blowing out North Carolina behind their elite guard play. The Mustangs are 12-2, with both losses coming to top 40 teams, and their backcourt of Boopie Miller, Jerome Pierre, and BJ Edwards is underrated as any group nationally, I believe. And their offense is heavily dependent on their guard play, which has been amazing so far, but when they're on, they are overwhelming to any team, which is what we saw against the Tar Heels this past week. And I have SMU right in this range as well and view them as a real tournament team right now, and if this guard group continues to dictate games like they have been, SMU could climb quickly as conference play continues. Virginia slides back to number 23 after a turbulent week that included a triple overtime road loss at Virginia Tech, but they followed that up with a dominant bounce-back win at NC State. And the Cavaliers were without a key guard in Jakari White in that loss, which matters when evaluating their resume. But now at 12-2, they've done enough to remain ranked, though a slight drop felt appropriate as I actually had them as 25 in my rankings. But I agree with keeping Virginia in the poll, even amid some of the criticism, and their ability to grind out wins defensively still travels, but consistency will define their ceiling, especially on the offensive end. And if they stabilize on that end of the floor, Virginia should remain a fixture in the ACC race moving forward. Next at number 22 is Kansas, who dropped in the poll after a disappointing road loss at UCF, which is continuing a trend of inconsistency that we've seen with the Jayhawks. Now they're 10-4, and the Jayhawks' resume is still solid, but the Darren Peterson injury situation continues to loom large as he played against UCF but didn't finish out the game. And this feels like a team that will be fine over the course of the regular season, but their ceiling in March is increasingly being questioned by me right now. And I actually have Kansas slightly higher than Tennessee based on comparable resumes, but the AP drop makes sense, and the talent is there, yet upcoming Big 12 matchups will definitely determine whether Kansas stabilizes in the rankings or continues to hover in this range. Tennessee comes in at number 21 after opening SEC play with a road loss at Arkansas, and like I mentioned for Kansas, I don't really understand why Tennessee is above them when Kansas beat them head-to-head, but the Vols are now 10-4 and remain a defensive-minded group with clear limitations offensively. Nate Ament flashes upside but is still raw, and the lack of consistent scoring punch caps Tennessee's ceiling for me, and I still view this team as a top 25 caliber, though I don't think they're necessarily elite, and in my rankings, I have them at number 21, so I'm pretty close with the AP poll on this one, but they do have a home matchup against Texas next that sets up as a critical get-right opportunity that could stabilize Tennessee before SEC play fully ramps up. And coming in at number 20 is Louisville, and this is another team like Tennessee and Kansas where I think Louisville should be behind Tennessee due to that head-to-head matchup and their comparable resumes. But this past week for the Cardinals was a split week that perfectly captured their recent volatility. They had a dominant win at Cal, but was followed by a damaging loss at Stanford, marking their third straight week of dropping in the polls. And since starting 7-0, the Cardinals are just 4-3 in their last 7, and the absence of Mikael Brown Jr. due to injury is clearly impacting their ceiling, and Pat Kelsey's group still has upside, but the consistency has been lacking, and I'm slightly lower on Louisville than the AP at the moment, but if they can get Mikael Brown Jr., that will go up, and a massive home matchup against Duke looms, and that game could either halt the slide or push Louisville further down the board. Iowa jumps up to number 19 after a convincing home win over UCLA, which continues a steady rise in the rankings. The Hawkeyes are 12-2 and have now won 4 straight, operating with the slow, system-driven offense anchored by Bennett Sturts, who has been outstanding so far this season. Their losses to Michigan State and Iowa State remain respectable, but their true ceiling is still unclear entering Big Ten play, and I have Iowa actually at this exact ranking, so it makes complete sense to me with where they're at. And next they have a road test at Minnesota, which I think is going to be a win and could push them even further up in the rankings next week. But one of the biggest risers in this week's AP poll is Georgia, as they're landing at number 18 after their wild overtime win against Auburn, and if you watched that game, you know just how crazy it was. But the Bulldogs are now 13-1 and are riding a 7-game winning streak and boast the highest scoring offense in the entire country right now. And with that being said though, the late game execution remains shaky and their resume still lacks elite wins. But Georgia is right where I would expect in the AP poll, but I do prefer to see more against top tier competition, which we will see in the SEC. And they have a looming matchup with Florida that will be telling. And if Georgia can clean up their execution while maintaining the offensive firepower that we've seen, this ranking could be justified sooner rather than later. North Carolina drops to number 17 in this week's AP poll following a rough defensive performance in their road loss at SMU, and the Tar Heels are now 13-2 on the year, and this game exposed some ongoing perimeter defense and depth concerns that I've had. Explosive guard play continues to give them trouble, which raises matchup-based concerns for March, especially in a time of the year where we see guards do play at the highest they can. And with that being said though, the loss does look better now that SMU is ranked, but how they respond defensively over the next few ACC games will dictate whether this slide continues or stabilizes quickly for the Tar Heels. Illinois rises to number 16 in this week's AP poll after quietly taking care of business while others around them in the rankings stumbled. The Illini are now 11-3 on the year and went 3-0 since the last poll update, including a solid road win at Penn State, and that consistency has allowed them to leapfrog several teams in the teens, and while they may not generate national buzz right now, their steady play is being rewarded, and I'm closely aligned with the AP poll here, as I actually have them one spot higher at 15, and if they can get some continued wins in Big Ten play, they'll jump even higher in the rankings, but I firmly believe that they belong in the top 15 conversation in the nation right now. But coming in at number 15 is Arkansas, who surged up to number 15 after their impressive home win over Tennessee, which reaffirms its identity as a fast, physical matchup nightmare for teams. The Razorbacks are also 11-3 on the year, with Darius Acuff leading a balanced attack alongside Malik Thomas and Trevin Brazil, and those three have been amazing for Arkansas so far, and they're now 6-1 since December with multiple quality wins, and I actually have Arkansas slightly higher than Texas Tech due to the head-to-head result and similar resumes. But with a favorable SEC schedule ahead, this feels like a team that could continue climbing and become a serious problem once March rolls around, and I think the Razorbacks are actually going to win the SEC this year. But just ahead of the Razorbacks is Texas Tech at number 14 after their dominant win over Oklahoma State in Big 12 play, which continues that upward momentum we've seen in the polls from them. The Red Raiders have now won 4 straight, with their Duke win still anchoring the resume, and the duo of Christian Anderson and JT Toppin remains elite. and Lawan Watts has also grown over the past couple of games and just adds another option for this team to go to. But the help and depth of this team still gives me concerns, with Luke Bamboye having not played recently as well. And I'm fine with Tech in this spot, but upcoming Big 12 play will test that depth even more. And if the core can stay healthy, Texas Tech has all the tools to stay exactly where they are or even move up. Alabama comes in at number 13, and the Crimson Tide continue to feel undervalued to me, as I think they're one of the most underrated teams in the entire country, especially after their emphatic SEC opening win over Kentucky. The Crimson Tide are now 11-3, with their only losses coming against elite competition of teams that are ranked above them. And Nate Oates' system has been awesome, and it's humming at a high level, which is driven by elite guard play from LeBaron Philon and Aiden Holloway, and controlling the tempo, and they've done that in almost all of their games. And I personally view Alabama as closer to top 10 caliber than their current ranking suggests, but it's not that far off for me. And they have big wins over Illinois and Kentucky and others that support that belief. And a huge road matchup at Vanderbilt is coming this week, and a win there could finally push Alabama even higher in the rankings and get them into the top 10 like I think they deserve. Michigan State is next at number 12 in the rankings, and they slid back a few spots after their narrow road loss at Nebraska. But at 12-2 on the year, the Spartans remain a respected team, but that game highlighted some of their offensive limitations, and voters moved them out of the top 10 after 4 straight weeks inside it, and it felt appropriate with Nebraska being undefeated right now. And I currently view Michigan State as clearly behind Nebraska, which is what we see here, but they're still dangerous and extremely well coached with Tom Izzo. But consistency on the offensive end will continue to define the ceiling that they have, and upcoming conference matchups will determine whether this is just a minor dip or a sign of a tighter margin moving forward for the Spartans. At number 11 is Vanderbilt, who stayed undefeated and continues one of the most impressive starts in the country. At 14-0, the Commodores have paired an efficient offense with a disciplined defense, ranking highly in both scoring and defensive efficiency metrics. And Tyler Tanner's emergence this season at point guard has elevated their ceiling even more, and Duke Miles coming in has given them another lethal offensive weapon. And even without a flood of marquee wins, I still think Vanderbilt should be in the top 10, but I do have them neck and neck with Nebraska in my rankings, and they do have a massive home matchup coming up against Alabama, and that game will go a long way toward determining whether Vanderbilt is a great story or a true national title contender. And coming in at number 10 in the AP poll rankings is Nebraska, who cracks the top 10 for the first time this year after their statement win over Michigan State this past week, which has validated their unbeaten start so far. And the Cornhuskers execute an elite spacing offense and have a disciplined no middle defensive scheme. And while they allow threes, they protect the rim exceptionally well, which is something that we saw against Michigan State. Price Samford and Rink Mass has been awesome for the Cornhuskers, and I have Nebraska as the second best team in the Big Ten behind Michigan right now, and I'm only one spot behind the AP rankings with having them 11th in my own. But upcoming Big Ten matchups will just determine how high this Nebraska team can go, but it looks like they're going to have the opportunity to win their first ever NCAA tournament game this year. Next is BYU, who moves up a spot to number 9 after a strong road win at Kansas State, which extends their winning streak to 10 games. And now BYU is 13-1 on the year, and it seems like early season doubts have vanished as quality wins continue to stack up and age well. And the Cougars have been efficient offensively and tough in transition and look every bit like a top 10 team, especially when you have a guy like AJ Debinsa, who is playing as one of the best players in college basketball right now. And I'm actually a little higher on BYU, as I have them 7th in my rankings, but I do see that they're right around all the other teams in this range. And with extended rest entering Big 12 play and upcoming home games against Arizona State and Utah, I think BYU is well positioned to maintain momentum and even go a little higher in the rankings if other teams around them seem to lose. Gonzaga is next at number A, and they actually slid back one spot and swapped spots with Houston, though their overall body of work remains strong. The Bulldogs navigated a busy stretch this past week with multiple wins, including a dominant bounce-back performance against Loyola Marymount after they had 2 scares in WCC play before that. and some results were definitely closer than expected that have raised some concerns for me, so I dropped them back a few spots in my rankings as well. But the depth that they have and the offensive balance still stand out, and I view Gonzaga firmly in this tier, which aligns with this ranking, and their next matchup is against Santa Clara, and with continued clean performances, they should stay firmly in the top 10 of the rankings going forward. Coming in at number 7 is Houston, who rises after handling business with wins over Middle Tennessee, and then a gritty road victory at Cincinnati. The Cougars are also 13-1 and are riding a 7-game winning streak and remain anchored by physical defense and execution, which is something that we've grown accustomed to with Kelvin Sampson's team. And I understand the swap in the AP poll with Gonzaga, though the margin between these teams is extremely razor thin, and Houston is still in the national title conversation, even though it seems like they've been out of the spotlight for a couple of weeks. But matchups against Texas Tech and Baylor are coming, and that stretch will reveal whether Houston belongs closer to the top 5 or should stay further back in the top 10. Duke is next at number 6 and held steady in the rankings despite surviving a pair of tight ACC tests this past week. But the Blue Devils are now 13-1, but recently the eye test has raised some concerns for me, particularly on the offensive end with their consistency. Cameron Boozer has been great still though, but it's been all of the surrounding pieces, as sometimes Isaiah Evans will be great, but other times he's a bit inconsistent, and it looks like John Shire might have shaken up the lineup a bit and inserted Caden Boozer into the starting lineup, so that may change a few things going forward. I actually dropped Duke a bit in my rankings back to number 9, but I still believe that they're a top 10 caliber team and have the potential to go even higher. And their upcoming road games, though, will matter, especially with Louisville coming into town here soon. And if their guard play can stabilize, Duke definitely has the talent to move back into the top tier quickly. Purdue remains at number 5 after another dominant week, including an impressive road win at Wisconsin. And the Boilermakers are now 13-1 on the year and continue to look like one of the nation's most complete teams. They have balance on both ends and consistent execution that define this group, as Braden Smith has looked like one of the best point guards still in the country. I'm fully aligned with the AP ranking here, as I have them at number 5, but a brutal February stretch awaits featuring multiple Big Ten contenders, but Purdue is built to handle it. And home games against Washington and Penn State are next, and continued dominance there will keep Purdue firmly in the championship discussion. Coming in at number 4 is UConn, and the Huskies stayed put after a strong week that included decisive wins over Xavier and Marquette. And UConn is now 14-1 on the season and has quietly been stacking wins while controlling games both offensively and defensively. And their only loss came earlier in the season against Arizona, which was a time when UConn was struggling with injuries. And now they remain the best one-loss team in the country, in my opinion. And I have UConn right in this range as well. And if one of those top teams take a loss, I'll definitely be moving UConn up, because I have so much confidence in Danny Hurley and this Huskies team. But upcoming, they do have games against Providence and DePaul, which should favor for UConn, but maintaining defensive intensity will be key as Big East play continues. Iowa State also stayed in the same spot at number 3 after moving to 14-0 with dominant wins to open conference play. The Cyclones are now number 3 in KenPom and continue to pair elite defense with efficient scoring. Their resume includes a convincing road win at Purdue, and they feel like a legitimate dark horse title contender, as everyone seems to be talking about Arizona and Michigan and forgetting that the Cyclones are right there as well. And I agree with this ranking and still feel like they're slightly underrated, but there's not necessarily anywhere for them to go. And with the favorable early Big 12 schedule, Iowa State could stay unbeaten until February, as they have upcoming games against Baylor and Oklahoma State, which they should win, but will be important tone setters going forward. Coming in at number 2 once again is the Michigan Wolverines, but they're number 1 in my power ranking still, with just how dominant that they have been. The Wolverines are 13-0 and historically dominant this season, winning by an average of 30 points per game, and they haven't played a close game in nearly 2 months and overwhelmed their opponents with pace, depth, and their sheer size. And only 1 point separates Michigan from Arizona right now in the AP poll rankings. But performance-wise, I truly believe Michigan has been the best team in the country. Upcoming, they have a road trip to Penn State and a home showdown with Wisconsin that should test their dominance, but I'm expecting much of the same for the Wolverines going forward. And remaining at number 1 again is the Arizona Wildcats after another flawless week that included them moving to 14-0 with convincing wins across the board. The Wildcats have shown consistency, versatility, and defensive pressure that separates them from most nationally, and there were no new concerns this week with the way that they played, and their resume continues to build and hold strong. But Michigan is closing the gap fast. As I mentioned, there's only 1 point between them, but Arizona is still in the top spot of this week's ranking, and I'm comfortable with it. And until they lose, it looks like AP voters aren't going to move them out of that top spot. They have a home game against Kansas State coming up, followed by a road trip to TCU, which should be 2 tough tests, but I'm expecting the Wildcats will get it done once again. But that wraps it up for today's video. Let me know your thoughts on this week's AP Top 25 rankings in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.